Welcome to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm your host, Tom Collins, Executive Director of the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission.
And I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for Clean Elections.
So in 1996, Arizona voters approved a proposition that would have allowed physicians to prescribe marijuana or cannabis for certain illnesses. And then the legislature very quickly all but repealed that law. Then in 2010, people of Arizona voted to legalize marijuana for medical use. Finally, in 2020, voters approved Proposition 207, which legalized the adult recreational use of marijuana.
And that brings us to today, where Arizona is considered one of the largest cannabis markets in the country. We're talking about how we got here and the impact it's had on our state up next.
We're here with Ray Stern. He's the state politics and issues reporter for the Arizona Republic. Ray, thanks for joining the show.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So you've been covering marijuana markets in Arizona for years now. How have you seen that market change over the years?
Well, the biggest change, of course, was going from the black market to, in 2010, a white market, I guess you could say, or whatever the opposite of black market is. And it's kind of, I guess I was wondering if I could say it's been a long, strange trip, or, would that be too cliche? But yeah, it's, marijuana has been illegal in Arizona for most of the state's history. It's a bad felony. They would take you to jail for it. And then the market just massively changed, mainly because of what California was doing and challenging the federal law, basically saying, hey, we're a state law. We don't have to adhere to federal law, or you can still have your federal law, but we're going to have our state law where marijuana is legal. And Arizona and a couple of other states were among the first to really try that out. And so that created a legal marijuana market here in Arizona in 2010 when voters legalized medical marijuana. And then it got even bigger in 2020 when voters legalized the recreational or adult use marijuana for everyone 21 and over.
So I've always found it so interesting about how government intersects with this industry. You've talked about the legalization component of it, but can you outline for our listeners how the state allocates marijuana tax dollars? What does this collection, these revenues look like, and where's that funding going?
You bet. So both the medical marijuana law that voters came up with in 2010 and the 2020 version have collections, as you mentioned, that basically take revenue from marijuana and put it into certain pots, essentially. And mainly those are three things. Those are community colleges, police and fire, first responders, and the highway user revenue. And then there's a few extra dollars there that go to have the Department of Health Services sort of implement their marijuana licensing program. And then there's also some money that goes to sort of these social equity nonprofit groups that sort of try to help relieve what have been a historic imbalance of the arrests. You've all heard about that between white people and people of color. People of color have a higher arrest rate. And so that's just off topic a little bit, but essentially there's two main schemes with the collections. The medical marijuana that is sold to people that have a medical marijuana card, that doesn't have a specific tax on it, although the dispensaries do have to charge the sales tax on it, which is different throughout cities, and there's also a state sales tax. So that money gets collected, goes into these funds I was talking about. And then the recreational marijuana one in 2020, that also has sales tax, but it also adds this 16% excise tax that gets a lot more money for these programs. At least it would, except as we can also talk about the revenues going down.
Does that mean less people are using or consuming?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I don't know that I've seen stats on that. My guess is no. I think that the consumption has gone up since legalization and has stayed pretty high. And whether it's gone down, I just haven't seen anything on that connects that to the decline in the revenue, which is happening because of a glut in supply mainly. And so prices are coming down. It's great for consumers. There is a pretty big market here in Arizona, and consumers have paid less for their product in the last year or so.
So let's go back to the legalization, and I appreciate the background that you provided. But what's been the impact or discussion or action taken on expungement, or record clearing for past marijuana related offenses? What does that look like?
It's really kind of minimal, actually. And it's I think maybe two things go into that. One is there is a little bit of a process to it. You have to proactively find one of these places that will help you get it expunged, and there's a little bit of a process. It's really not that hard. Basically, you just apply for it, and as long as you are were convicted of something that is now legal, then it will be expunged. But there's also, I think, a apathy aspect to that. Although there's been a lot of talk about how a marijuana conviction can really hurt your chances of finding a job or something like that, or an apartment, the fact is that a single marijuana conviction back in the year 2000 or something like that, or 1995, that someone had, it was not prosecuted as a felony. The initial arrest may have been that, but that would get bumped down to probably, maybe even like a non-prosecutable offense where the person just goes to drug therapy or something like that. And so that hasn't really impacted a lot of jobs. Nobody really cares about marijuana anymore. Today employers don't really care if you smoked marijuana and got busted for it 25 years ago. So there's not a big reason to run to the authorities to get the expungement. And last I saw, I think it was maybe 10% of the potential expungements that could be happening have happened, maybe even less than that. The whole stigma of marijuana has really changed over the last 20 years. People don't really see it as the massive problem it was. It's not the devil's weed anymore, really.
Well, on that point, one of the history of this in Arizona, at least, is as you alluded to, has taken many years, starting in the 90s through 2020, and so voter sentiment around this has always been ahead of legislators' sentiment about it. And in this session, we have a legislator proposing both a statute that could get signed by the governor if it got to her, and I think a referendum on excessive marijuana smoke and odor. Can you talk a little bit about that measure?
Absolutely. There's two measures that Senator J.D. Mesnard is moving that have to deal with that. One is a potential ballot measure that looks to be failed at this point. It failed in the Senate. It could come back potentially, like as a strikeable amendment. But the bill that Mesnard proposed, that's basically exactly the same thing, is still going through. And there's not going to be it looks like it's got bipartisan support, which is really interesting. We've heard some interesting debates even by Democrats in there that just talk about how they are impacted by this. Nobody really wants to be inundated with the smell of marijuana unless they wanted that, right? And if you don't care, then if you're smoking it, then you don't mind. But if you do not smoke, if you have kids and a lot of marijuana smoke is coming your way, it turns out that a lot of people care about that. So Mesnard's bill is pretty popular at this session. There's been a lot of debate and Democratic support. The question I think is going to be interesting is, even if it passes and even if the governor signs it, will dispensaries or whoever sue over the fact that it did not get the required 3/4 majority to pass the Voter Protection Act? Mesnard has kind of explained that maybe it doesn't really need that because this doesn't have to do with our legal marijuana system. This is just marijuana smoke in general, so wherever it's coming from. I just wanted to mention too, one of the really weird things that's happened over the last couple of years is this hemp situation. Hemp became legal federally in 2018 with a Ninth Circuit Court ruling. Taking hemp and concentrating it into highly potent THC products became legal in 2018 with this ruling. Federally, though, not in states. And so in places like Texas, where they don't have legal marijuana, these hemp stores just exploded, and the state could do nothing about it because it was federally legal. Go figure. It's just a weird world in that way. But that loophole has been taken out, and so it's possible that those hemp stores may go away. But those products got people high in exactly the same way as marijuana, and it's just a major loophole. And then here in Arizona, where pot is legal, the Attorney General, Chris May, has decided that these hemp products could not be sold except in dispensaries. So you have this just weird. I just love it. It's like in Texas, it's like hemp. Things that get you high with hemp are legal federally, so you can buy them there. Here they're illegal, but you can buy regular marijuana here.
Well, thanks for listening to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm Gina Roberts.
And I'm Tom Collins. We'll see you next week.